How's it going, everyone, and welcome to the Thinking Blue podcast. I'm your host, Blake Harris. We have a jam-packed show for you guys this week. I'm going to be talking about the latest injury news surrounding a good number of Dodgers, a signing that came out of the blue that I didn't get to talk about last week. I'll be talking about the Astros series from last week, along with more in-depth analysis on the Max Scherzer, Trea Turner trade. And I'm going to be having a special guest later in the show. I'm going to hold the suspense for that one before we get to the middle portion of the show to let you guys try to figure out who's going to be joining me, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to talking to my guest, and after that, I'm going to be answering your guys' questions, as always, in my Q&A to wrap up the episode. Before we get to everything that we're going to cover in this episode, make sure you guys follow me on Twitter at Blake Harris TBLA, the latest Dodgers news and everything over there. If you're a Dodgers fan and if you're on Twitter, it's an absolute must follow. If you're listening to the podcast, you likely already follow me on Twitter, but in case you don't, make sure you guys follow me over there. Also, you guys can listen to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube, so wherever you guys get your podcasts, or if you like listening on YouTube, you guys can find it over there. So as I mentioned at the start of the show, we're going to kick things off with the latest injury news, because there's a lot to get to. I mean, months and months ago, when I was doing this on a more consistent basis, it seemed like every episode that I was talking about, there was some sort of injury. And, well, we're back because, as always, the Dodgers, they can't go more than a day or two without some sort of injury messing up with the team. So the latest piece of news actually happened about an hour ago, and that is Clayton Kershaw, Danny Duffy. They have both been placed on the 60-day injured list. Now, I know a lot of people saw that they were transferred there and they started to freak out, but this really is no biggie, especially, considering Clayton Kershaw and Danny Duffy weren't expected back until September. But it definitely is something to keep an eye on. But again, I don't think this is something to concern yourself with too much. I believe Kershaw is eligible to return on September 5th. So that first week of September, which again, this past week, Dave Roberts, Clayton Kershaw, they talked about early September, so being when Kershaw could potentially return, so that makes sense. Danny Duffy, I believe the day he's eligible to return would be September 15th. So Danny Duffy's going to return, hopefully if he's able to return on the September 15th date. He's only going to have 2 weeks to pretty much have a tryout for the Dodgers for their, October bullpen. I mean, I'm sure he might get a start or two, depending on where the health is in regards to the Dodgers starting rotation. Maybe he'll go straight to the bullpen, but I think we all expect Danny Duffy to make that October bullpen, assuming he's healthy and ready to go. But if for whatever reason, those 2 weeks, he, doesn't look great, maybe the Dodgers go another direction. So for Danny Duffy, it's tough that he's not going to be back until September 15th. But again, hopefully those 2 weeks he's able to leave a good impression on the Dodgers staff, and he's able to secure a spot in the bullpen come October. Speaking of the bullpen come October, the Dodgers are going to be without arguably, their best reliever that they've had this season. I know a lot of people, when you think of who's been the Dodgers, best, most consistent reliever, Blake Trinan, he's definitely, a solid option, but Jimmy Nelson on the season, 1.86 ERA, 0.93 WHIP, 1.89 FIP. His strikeouts per nine was something like 14 strikeouts per nine. He was, again, arguably the Dodgers' best reliever this season. He's been on the injury list a few times, so, hasn't really been there throughout the entire season like Blake Trinan has. And Jimmy Nelson is going to be out for the season. He's getting Tommy John surgery, so he's likely going to be out all of next season as well. And man, this is just an absolute blow, not only for the Dodgers, but for Jimmy Nelson. I mean, this was a guy the Dodgers signed, a year and a half or 2 years ago, whenever it was. He missed all of 2020 with an injury, so his entire season was wiped out. The Dodgers brought him back, signed him to a minor league contract this offseason. He came into spring training fighting for a spot on the 40-man roster. Jimmy Nelson wasn't on the team. He wasn't on the 40-man roster coming into spring training. He looked fantastic. He was pitching excellent, and he earned a final spot in the bullpen and on that 40-man roster. And again, he's been fantastic this season, has dealt with a few injuries here and there, but when he pitches, he's been lights out. He's been fantastic. So again, not only is he out for the rest of this season, he's out for likely all of next season as well. So hopefully for Jimmy Nelson, hopefully he's able to bounce back. Hopefully he's able to recover. Maybe in 2023, the Dodgers look into bringing him back. But yeah, an absolute blow because, again, he's been so good. What a great story he's been. And he would have been a crucial piece for the Dodgers bullpen come October. So I feel like a lot of Dodgers fans that I've seen, this one kind of flew under the radar, but I mean, it's an absolute blow for the Dodgers. Again, hopefully they're able to, find guys like Danny Duffy, some of these guys they've been claiming off waivers the last few weeks that can fill into that role. So yeah, one down in October. You hate to see it for Jimmy Nelson. Hopefully he's back and better than ever in about a year and a half or two whenever he's fully recovered from the Tommy John surgery. Speaking of more arms that are going on the injured list, Victor Gonzalez, Garrett Clevinger, they both have separate injuries. Victor Gonzalez and Garrett Clevinger, they have not looked good at all in 2021. They've been placed on the injured list multiple times with different things. No timetable as to when either pitcher can return, but I don't think the Dodgers are going to be hurting without either. Victor Gonzalez, I just don't know what it is. He's an entirely different pitcher this year than he was last year. I mean, last year he was quietly one of the better relievers in the National League, and this year, I mean, he's just entirely different. So whatever's going on with him, hopefully he can figure it out. But yeah, no timetable as to when we can see either one of those pitchers return out of the bullpen. The final piece of injury news that I do want to talk about is Gavin Lux, who seems like the forgotten man over the last 3 weeks. He hurt his hamstring back in Colorado shortly after the All-Star break, and we've essentially heard nothing about him. Like, the beat reporters never ask really any questions in regards to what's the latest with Gavin Lux. When's he going to return? We finally got an update yesterday from Dave Roberts saying that Gavin Lux is going on a rehab assignment in Oklahoma City with the AAA affiliate, which got me thinking, this is an interesting situation with Gavin Lux. I posted an article today on TrueBlueLA.com, so if you haven't read that, go over there and give it a read, but I don't really know what the Dodgers are going to do when Gavin Lux is fully recovered and ready to go, because when he comes back, Corey Seager, he's going to be at shortstop, and oh, by the way, the Dodgers now have Trea Turner at second base, so Gavin Lux doesn't have a starting spot anymore. If Corey Seager or Trea Turner get a day off, well, Chris Taylor, Max Muncy, those guys are going to fill in at second base, and it's just tough to see Gavin Lux seeing consistent playing time. He could very well be an option off the bench for the Dodgers. He could be a pinch hitter, a pinch runner, something like that. But I don't really expect Gavin Lux to be, a defensive switch late in games. You're not going to be taking Trea Turner or Corey Seager out of the game in favor of Gavin Lux. Again, maybe if you need a pinch runner, like for example, Albert Pujols gets on base and you need a pinch runner, or maybe just someone else gets on base and you want to enhance the speed, then Gavin Lux can be a solid piece off the bench. But I just don't know if the Dodgers want to do that. I mean, they could keep him in Oklahoma City, where they could give him consistent at-bats, consistent reps. He's seen everyday playing time. Who knows, maybe being back in AAA for a few weeks or a month can help him fix some things at the plate. I know a lot of people were arguing in the comment section of that article I posted, because essentially, for the most part, this is what's going to happen with the Dodgers depth. Cody Bellinger, Austin Barnes, Albert Pujols, those three guys are locked and loaded. They're going to be pieces on your bench. Matt Beatty's likely going to be the fourth because he's able to play, in the outfield. He's able to play first base, third base. So I think Matt Beatty's going to get that spot. If the Dodgers go with a fifth piece off the bench, it's likely down to between Billy McKinney and Gavin Lux. I know some people earlier were saying I was claiming that Billy McKinney is a better option than Gavin Lux. That's not what I was saying. I was pretty much essentially saying that, given the two choices, Billy McKinney, he's able to play in the outfield. He plays above average defense. He's an okay bat. He's been better than Gavin Lux at the plate, which isn't really saying much. But, overall, if you're having a guy that you just need off the bench, do you want Gavin Lux or Billy McKinney? And I just sided with McKinney because I thought it would make more sense to have Gavin Lux, again, seeing consistent starts, consistent playing time in Oklahoma City. Do the Dodgers do that? Do they want to do that to Gavin Lux? I'm not entirely sure. But there's no room for him. There's no room for him to be starting with the big league team unless there are injuries of some sort. So in a week or two, whenever Gavin Lux is healthy enough to return from the IL, the Dodgers have an interesting situation in their hands. I could see them going either way. I don't think either choice is a bad one. But it does suck for Gavin Lux because he was supposed to be the starting second baseman this year. He was given the keys to run away with it, and he just simply couldn't. I mean, ever since about the middle end of May, he's been atrocious at the plate. He's hitting below 200, not hitting for power at all. His defense at second base is fine. It's below average at shortstop. So, yeah, I mean, if the Dodgers want to keep him, his best asset is his speed, which for some reason he doesn't really utilize. Whenever he does get on base, he's not stealing bases. He's not trying to, bunt against the shift, anything like that. So I don't know how much of an impact his speed would really make, where if you want to keep him on the roster for that very reason. So we'll have to wait and see. Definitely something that I wanted to mention, something I wanted to talk about because, again, the Dodgers, they have an interesting situation with Gavin Lux coming in about a week or two whenever he's fully healthy, ready to return from the injured list. I can't remember, moving on now to the next piece of news. We're done with injuries. I don't remember if last week when I recorded my podcast, if this news had broken yet, but if it had, I know I didn't really talk about it, but the Dodgers signed Cole Hamels. Yeah, and I know what you're thinking. Cole Hamels is still around. He's still in the league. Well, he hasn't been pitching this year. He only pitched in one game in 2020, so we really haven't seen Cole Hamels since 2019. So in 2019, he was solid. He was 7-7, had a 3.81 ERA, was averaging pretty much one strikeout per inning that he was throwing, and the Dodgers signed him to their 40-man roster as a potential depth piece. He'll likely be getting starts once he's activated. I think the plan is for him to be activated and on the active roster before September 1st. I think there's something where if he's going to be on the October roster at all, he has to pitch by September 1st, so expect Cole Hamels to be activated sometime in the next 3 weeks. He recently threw a sim game at Dodger Stadium. I believe he only pitched 1 or maybe 2 innings. He threw to Matt Beatty and Zach Rex, I believe, so not much of a sim game there with the hitters he's having to face. Dave Roberts was talking about him trying to get built up. The goal is to get Cole Hamels built up to 5 innings, so he's able to give the Dodgers some starts, again, whenever he's able to come up, because with Kershaw on the injured list, Danny Duffy not coming back, Tony Gonsolin, who knows when he's going to come back, David Price, he's been getting better, but he's still kind of a little question mark. I think the Dodgers still prefer him in the bullpen. So Cole Hamels, he gives the Dodgers some depth in their starting rotation. Come October, if needed, he could probably slide into the bullpen, give him a lefty out of the bullpen, when needed in the postseason. So overall, a very interesting signing. I don't think it's much, of a risk. Either Cole Hamels looks above average, he looks like he did a few years ago, and it's a fantastic signing for the Dodgers. If he just doesn't have it anymore, he doesn't look good. I think they only signed him to $1 million contract, so you're out $1 million. You don't have to worry about him being on your, roster come October. So I got no problem with it. It'll be interesting to see, because if Cole Hamels has anything left in the tank, this could turn out to be a really good, signing by the Dodgers. A weird one, though, because, again, the Dodgers have essentially signed almost everyone from that 2008 Phillies team. So unless Ryan Howard's coming out of retirement, we pretty much have gotten all the key pieces of that team. But I'm excited to see what Cole Hamels brings. Again, he's probably not going to make the club for another 3 weeks or so. If he's only throwing 2 innings now and they want to get him up to 5 innings, it's probably going to be at least 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks until we see him. But yeah, Cole Hamels, looking forward to seeing what he brings, and we'll just see how that experiment goes. The next thing that I wanted to mention before we get to our interview with my special guest, I know in my last podcast, I pretty much talked about the Max Scherzer and Trea Turner trade, pretty much going over what it means for the Dodgers, what it means for the Nationals, everything that was involved, pretty much my reactions over those few days that trade was going down. So we finally have gotten to see both players in action. Took Trea Turner a little longer because he was on the COVID IL, had to come to Los Angeles. We'll start with Max Scherzer, who made his Dodgers debut last week against the Astros. And my goodness, I mean, we talk about Walker Buehler being a big game pitcher. Max Scherzer is one of the best big game pitchers in all of baseball, and he was fantastic. He struck out 10, he went 7 innings. Pretty much for the most part, he allowed a solo home run in the first inning. And then I think the second run he allowed was like 2 bloop singles or something like that. So he wasn't getting lit up at all by the Astros. He was in cruise control all night. He dominated. Got a curtain call when he left the game. And what an addition he'll be to the Dodgers starting rotation, who desperately needs some arms right now. Max Scherzer, what an outing it was. I can't remember, obviously like the Clayton Kershaw no-hitter performance, some performances we've seen from Kershaw and Buehler, in like the playoffs, but a regular season outing, it's tough to remember one kind of his hype and, as amazing as the one that we saw from Max Scherzer the other day. Probably the Walker Buehler one from a couple years ago when I think he had like 15 strikeouts against the Rockies, I want to say. Maybe it wasn't the Rockies. That was an unreal game. I remember I was actually at that game. That was an unreal atmosphere. But yeah, Max Scherzer, he's the real deal. Looking forward to seeing his next start. It's going to be in Philadelphia tomorrow. But again, I mean, what an addition for the Dodgers. They desperately need him. And I think, if they're able to make it to October, they're able to win the division. Max Scherzer is going to play a big role in the Dodgers World Series push. But, a lot of people thought of it as the Max Scherzer trade. But it's also the Trea Turner trade. And this is a guy where, when healthy, he's an MVP candidate right now. I believe he's currently the second best odds, maybe the third best odds in the National League. I think he has like top 5 WAR in regards to Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. A lot of people have talked about Trea Turner being an all-around player. I myself have been a personal fan of his for so many years, but I've never really gotten the chance to like just fully watch and analyze his game before. And Trea Turner, he's one of the most exciting players in all of baseball. So not only does he hit for average, not only does he hit for power, this guy makes his difference on the base paths. I think statistically, like using StatCast, he might actually be the fastest player in all of baseball. And we got a glimpse of that this weekend. I mean, just in a couple games, Trea Turner's speed on the bases was the difference maker in the Dodgers' 2 wins. I mean, this guy is insanely fast. He literally went from first to home on an infield single. Let that sink in. This guy scored from first on a single. That's how fast he is. That's how much of a difference he is on the bases. I believe he scored from first on like a double from Max Muncy on Saturday. This guy, I mean, the Dodgers have been desperately lacking someone that can make an impact on the bases, which is ironic considering they have Gavin Lux, Cody Bellinger, Mookie Betts, guys that are, fairly fast, but they don't necessarily make huge impacts, stealing bases, going from first to third, going from first to home. So having a guy like Trea Turner in your leadoff spot, he's going to make a huge difference for the Dodgers moving forward. And one thing that I want to mention as well before we move on from Trea Turner, this is a guy that's one of the best shortstops in all of baseball. He's not a Gold Glove winner by any means, but he's definitely an upgrade over Corey Seager. He's definitely an above-average shortstop defensively. The Dodgers asked him to move to second base, to play second base, a place he hasn't played since, I want to say 2016 was the last time Trea Turner had any experience at second base. And he doesn't look like a shortstop. He looks like a second baseman. Granted, it's been only 2 games, but Trea Turner has looked phenomenal at second base. He's made some diving plays. He's made some running plays. This guy looks like a natural at second base. So if Trea Turner is able to thrive at second base, this potentially gives the Dodgers a better chance to re-sign Corey Seager, stick Seager at shortstop for the future. Again, you could work with the DH if they eventually bring it back. But Trea Turner's ability at second base to be above average defensively, that could be huge for the Dodgers because then it also allows Max Muncy to stay at first base. You don't have to worry about him moving to second base. You can keep Chris Taylor in the outfield. I'm sure at some point we're going to see Trea Turner play center field. We're probably going to see him at shortstop when Corey Seager gets a day off. But I have been very impressed with what I've seen from Trea Turner at second base. Again, he's looked fantastic. He's looked comfortable there. Again, it's only been 2 games, but if he's able to be, our second baseman this year, next year, well done. I know that's got to take a lot, asking him to move over from his primary position, but I just wanted to say that he's looked damn good so far through the first few games we've seen him at second base. So Trea Turner, Max Scherzer, those 2 guys are as good as advertised. So we're going to switch things up right now. We are going to transition now into my interview with my guest. This is going to be a fun one, so let's go to that recording right now. Well, joining me this week is a very, very, very special guest, a diehard Dodgers fan, but most importantly, I think a much better introduction is my girlfriend. Joining the show is, we'll just refer to her as MJ. MJ, welcome to the podcast. I asked how you're doing, but I got that answer about 15 minutes ago when you got back from work, but I'll ask it again for the sake of the viewers that didn't get to hear our back and forth banter 15 minutes ago. How's your day going?
It's going pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. After months and months of threatening to kick me out of the apartment if I didn't get you on, finally we can make it happen. as as I could see you're enjoying that joke right there. So we're going to be talking about a few things today on the podcast, talking about you being a Dodgers fan, how you became a Dodgers fan, because you weren't born and raised in Los Angeles, so you have a different story than most other people. Talking about some Dodgers stuff, talking about Kenley Jansen, talking about the season as a whole, and my personal favorite that I'm looking forward to when we wrap this up. MJ is going to give us her, I don't know if it's a top 5, if it's her top 10. I don't know yet. She'll be saving that. Her hottest Dodgers currently on the team and her hottest Dodgers of all time. I think of all time, I could probably guess who is going to be on the list. I'm interested to see where she ranks players this year, although I think I already know who the top 3 are, but we'll have to wait and see. So a nice tease for the end of the show. If there are any females listening to the show, they have that to look forward to, that she'll be ranking our hottest Dodgers of all time. So we're going to kick things off with how you became a Dodgers fan. Like I said, you didn't grow up. You weren't born and raised in Los Angeles like most Dodgers fans. So explain with us how you became a Dodgers fan and why you adopted them as your go-to team.
Yeah, so I was born in Chile, actually. So I didn't actually grow up with baseball. Um, but when I was younger, I moved to Florida with my mom and my grandparents. And my grandparents were Marlins fans because they lived in Florida. Um, but then after living in Florida, we moved to Los Angeles. And prior to me being born, my family had lived in Los Angeles. And my grandmother decided she was home all day. She didn't know what to watch, and she watched Dodger games. And she became a really big Dodgers fan with my grandpa. They went to a bunch of games together. They saw Fernando's no hitter, all that jazz. So just because I spent a lot of time with my grandparents once I moved to Los Angeles, that is how I became a Dodger fan. And I watched every game with her every night.
Well, there you go. So that's a much better story than I'm sure a lot of us have. So you're a Dodgers fan, diehard, just like me. One of the perks of dating you, I'd say, is getting to talk Dodgers with you on a daily basis. What are your thoughts so far on how the season's played out so far? You know, they won the World Series last year. Lots of expectations this year. We both, were expecting a runaway probably with the division at this point, but that's not the case. So what are just overall thoughts on, 2/3 of the way through the season, how it's shaped out so far?
You know, it's been hit and miss. A lot of games have been frustrating to say the least, as you know. Um, but it's kind of exciting at the same time, especially with the Giants at the top. We finally get that rivalry back. And as much as we hate seeing the Giants win, at least it guarantees us a win at the same time. Um, so yeah, we were World Series champions, but we are playing, I would say, pretty well if we're the second best team in baseball. We just happen to be in a really hard division this year, so I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
I wish I had that mindset like you. You're more optimistic than I am. So a few things that I do want to touch up on. I know they're both passionate topics, but I know one of them, certainly with you, you're more passionate about, and that's with our beloved Kenley Jansen. If for those of you that follow me on Twitter, you all know that Kenley Jansen is my goddamn closer, but Kenley Jansen is also MJ's goddamn closer because he's the greatest closer in Dodgers history. He's one of the best closers we've seen in baseball over the last decade. And he'll likely be receiving Hall of Fame votes at some point once he's retired, because he's going to retire probably top 8 to 10 in saves. Among closers, he'll be near the top in strikeouts, WHIP, ERA plus, a whole bunch of other categories. So he's one of the all-time greats. But Dodgers fans don't really remember what you've done for me over the last decade or what you did in the entire first half. They remember the couple bad games you have. Now, granted, some of them he just didn't have, velocity. He didn't have command. Some of them, they were bloop singles. They hit against the shift. His defense screwed him completely. We were at one of the games he blew in recent weeks against the Giants. And over the last few weeks, it's just gotten really, really bad for the most part. There's TikToks of fans booing him as he's coming out of the bullpen, which is inexcusable. So I just want to get your thoughts on Kenley Jansen. Should he be the Dodgers closer? What are your thoughts on the reception he receives from Dodgers fans after, again, for the most part, being a Hall of Fame closer up to this point in his career?
I'm very passionate about Kenley, and I will protect him for the rest of my life. Um, I just don't really understand where this all came from because prior to what, like 2 weeks ago, he was like amazing, and everyone was like, "Oh, he got snubbed as an all-star." Blah 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 blah. And I think that that's what happens with Kenley. Like he'll blow a save or two, and then people are like, "God, I hate him," and I don't really understand. And when he does, for example, the past two saves or outings he's had have been nearly perfect, if not perfect. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any praise for him. And people are real quiet when he does well, it seems. And I guarantee that if he had those consecutive blown saves scattered out throughout the year, we wouldn't be having a conversation about Kenley Jansen. It just happened to be like 3 days in a row, and now he's garbage and the worst closer, and he should be sent down to single A, which is absurd. And if you're a Dodger fan and you're just gonna sit there and trash talk this man when he's done a lot for this team, which I don't understand. And like you said, we were at that game and everybody just started booing him. And I just don't think it's classy to boo your own team at home. And if you're going to boo him as he's going out into the ninth, you think that's what he needs to do well in the ninth? If he doesn't come back to the Dodgers, it's probably because of fans, because I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, through the first half of the season, entering the All-Star break, I think he had like two blown saves, one of which was like in the first week of the season. And aside from that, he was lights out, literally probably the second best closer in all of baseball. But again, you blow, I think it was three. I mean, granted, blowing three consecutive games outings isn't ideal. I believe two of them, again, had to do with his defense absolutely shafting him, soft contact. Kenley, he's not as good as he once was, but he's still arguably one of the 10 best relievers or closers in all of baseball. We see closers blow games all the time. Mark Melancon of the Padres blew one the other day, and apparently everyone was ready to denounce him as the closer. Will Smith of the Braves blew one the other day, and it's a thing. You're not going to be perfect as a closer, and he hasn't been perfect the last few weeks. But yeah, I don't agree in booing him, especially booing him when he's coming out. If you want to boo him when he leaves a game because he blew a game, I still don't think it's right to boo a Dodger player, Dodger Stadium. But if you want to boo, then go ahead. But do not boo him when he's coming out to pitch. That is literally not going to help his confidence in any shape or form. I mean, this is a guy that has literally put his life on the line pitching with his heart conditions in order to pitch for the Dodgers. I know people have some bad memories of what he's done in the postseason, but of course, every pitcher for the most part is not perfect in the postseason. They have awful games. Kenley has a lot of great outings in October that a lot of Dodgers fans just forget about. So yeah, I mean, he's still my goddamn closer. I'm sure once October rolls around, it'll be a closer by committee, but Kenley Jansen has done nothing to lose his closer title. As everyone remembers earlier in the season, Blake Treinen had games that he blew. Blake Treinen literally blew a game in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. Corey Knebel, we only saw him like 6 or 7 times before he got hurt for 2.5 months. So I don't know why people want him to be a closer after that. So yeah, Kenley Jansen's my goddamn closer. Kenley Jansen is MJ's goddamn closer. And MJ, do you have any parting words for Kenley before we move on to our next subject?
I just feel bad for the guy. That's it. Every time we see him come out, I have like anxiety just because I don't want people to hate on him. And I
Right.
hope people learn to not to, because a lot of players aren't good. And I could name a few on the Dodgers who have slumps that people don't boo. So why do we boo
Mm-hmm.
Kenley?
Right. And again, this is a big teddy bear. He loves the Dodgers. He's never spoken poorly of the fan. He could have come out and trashed on Dodgers fans for booing, but he opted not to. So we love Kenley. We stand Kenley in our household over here. So we love you, big man. He like I said, he's our goddamn closer. So before we talk about MJ's hottest Dodgers, this is one that I had to add to the doc because I would love to just hear her thoughts because she's kind of starting to get more involved in regards to this subject. I know a lot of Dodger fans listening probably are involved as well. And I want to get her thoughts on Padres Twitter as a whole because it is the absolute worst thing in all of humanity. No matter what, we get just gulped into whatever it is they're talking about, whatever they're skewing out of their mouths. Yesterday, I was going back and forth with the San Diego radio sports host guy, Stephen Woods, because I tweeted that Adam Frazier, their big, massive trade deadline acquisition, was like hitting below 200 through his first 2 weeks. And then I guess after a hot series against the D-backs, this Adam Frazier got his average with the Padres up to about 270. So we exchanged jabs. Of course, I ended up on top with my replies. And pretty much war ensued between Dodgers and Padres Twitter over a different amount of things. So, MJ, from an outsider's point of view, someone who's not deep in it like I am, where people aren't tweeting your name specifically, hating on you, sending you DMs, what are your thoughts on what Padres Twitter has turned itself into over the last 12 months?
Honestly, I think it's pretty stupid. But actually, here's the thing, and we talk about this often, but I don't understand because they're not in first place. So I don't know why they talk all this trash. Because if you were in first place and talked trash, I would accept it. I would allow it because you're in first place. You're beating us. But you want to act like, we won a Mickey Mouse ring that they didn't win. That we swept them in the first playoff game that they had like a parade for just making it into, but then say we're stupid for celebrating same Mickey Mouse ring that they were celebrating getting into the playoffs too. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me that they're in third place behind us. So why are you going to say we're awful and a bad team? Like if you were ahead of us, yeah, you're right. But no. So I just like a lot of the things that they say don't make any sense on Twitter. And a lot of the time they're like bashing their own team at the same time. Doesn't make sense to me. I think it's stupid.
It is very stupid. And yes, everything you said I agree with. If you're gonna talk smack, at least do it from first place. Don't do it in third place. When this is your biggest season in franchise history. And by the way, the Cincinnati Reds are literally right behind you. So Padres Twitter is the worst. It'll never stop. Hopefully, the Dodgers can win the division. The Padres get bounced, and we have bookmarks and tweets saved. That'll be an absolute parade on our end. So without further ado, we're going to get to the best part of the program, the one I'm looking forward to most. Very interested to see which direction you go with this. So, as I mentioned to a tease at the beginning, MJ's compiled a list of her hottest players on the Dodgers currently and her hottest players of all time. Number one, all time is going to surprise you. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have an idea of who it is based on what I tweeted last week on the jersey she was wearing as a little tease. So I'll throw it to you. You can start off with all time. You can start off with this season, however you want to go about it. The floor is yours.
All right. Um, we could start with current. I feel like that might be more
Okay.
relevant.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't have them in like one, like who's my number one. I just have the top five.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start off with the obvious, who is the love of my life, Joseph Kelly, however you want to call him. But I mean, you know how I feel about him.
Yes, I sure do.
And then who do we have? AJ Pollock, the hottest hitter on the team, the hottest hitter in all of baseball. I don't know, but but quite literally, he's doing really well. So, but I love AJ. I love his walk-up song. We just love AJ.
We do.
Um, Next, you can't not have a list without Clayton Kershaw, who is quite literally the ultimate DILF. So Clayton's definitely up there. Okay, this next one, it was really hard to pick 5 because every hot player I like leaves. So I have
I will
to.
say this as well. I want to say this as well before I let her go. So I said I know who 3 of hers are going to be. So her top 3 is exactly how I imagined it would be. So these next 2, I have no clue who she's going to pick. So I just want to add the element of surprise where I'm learning these along with you guys. So I'll let you take over these final 2. And also, again, she ranks these based on, again, she thinks Clayton Kershaw is a DILF. So that's why he's on the list. It might not be like the prototypical every other girl, Corey Seager's the hottest man, but MJ is a fan of dads. She likes some older men. She likes some dads. Now, is that going to reflect in her final 2? Because as we saw, Kershaw, Pollock, Kelly, all fathers. So there is a trend. So I'll let you finish off these final 2 to see if they stick in the trend.
Okay, well, we have a soon-to-be father.
Mm-hmm.
I put Cody on here. I've never really been a Cody girl, and you know that.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think it's the hair. I don't know what it is this season. I think he would be maybe higher if he was getting more hits, but it is what it is. And then I have. Okay, this one's really specific though because it's Mookie.
Okay.
Okay, but specifically every time he walks to Dodger Stadium and he's wearing his outfits that are like perfect. So, yeah, I do have an honorable mention though. And he is a newcomer. So I will say Max Scherzer is also on my list. But only when he's wearing a uniform and has his hat on. And it's probably strictly because of the eyes. So,
and that's okay. That's
yeah.
okay. So there you go. So she breaks it up. So Mookie Betts only when he's entering the stadium, when he's wearing his amazing outfits that he always rocks. And Cody Bellinger, just because he's gone full let it go look, the long hair, the beard, wears his headband every game. And it's growing on MJ. And of course, Max Scherzer, because those eyes are just, I'd get lost in those eyes. So those are her current list of who she thinks the hottest players are. Now we're going to transition into the hottest players of all time. Well, I mean, I guess from, the last 15, 20 years or so. We're not going back to the 60s, 70s, or 80s, unless she wants to. But all right, who are your hottest Dodgers players in your eyes over the last couple of decades?
Okay. You might know maybe like 2 of these. Or you might
I know 2 guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, once I say them, you'll be like, oh yeah. Okay, so we'll go with number 1. You want to let them know?
I'll let you tell them because it's too good. I'll let you take over, but I know who it is.
Well, I'm gonna have to say the Dodgers' best third baseman ever to wear the uniform, the best number 23 ever on Dodgers. I'm gonna have to go with good old Casey Blake.
You forgot the best beard ever as well.
Oh man, in beard we trust.
And the best trade during the 2008 season.
Thank you, Ned Coletti.
So there you go. MJ literally has the number 23 tattooed on her because of her love for Casey Blake. So that's dedication right there.
Yep, not because my name is MJ.
Go figure.
Okay, so next, someone I am still mourning that is not on the team. Good old Kike, because I'm really missing those yoga pants that he wears. And Blake knows. I met Kike actually with Blake. And why don't you tell him what happened when I met Kike?
She was struggling to comprehend what was happening, and she forgot to record him signing her ball. She pretty much got the him giving the ball back to her, but the entire interaction she missed because she was stressing so much about meeting him she couldn't hit the record button.
Good
Good
times. Good
times.
times. Okay, so my next three, I'm gonna go with David Freese.
I see it staying on
Yep.
the dad portion of this.
Very dad. And then we're gonna go other dad, Brad Osmus.
I knew it was coming.
Okay, and then finally we're gonna go with Skip Schumacher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the. I will say I also have an honorable mention for this list, and it will be Sandy Koufax because he is definitely a gilf. So that's that. That's my list. I know a lot of people won't agree, and I know a lot of. If there's any ladies listening to this, I'm sorry I didn't put Corey Seager or Chris Taylor on my list, but they just don't do it for me.
Yeah, for their own reasons. So there you go. MJ's top 5 all-time hottest Dodgers, her top 5 current hottest Dodgers. No names on there that really surprised me because every name has been brought up at some point in numerous conversations about being hot. So quite the list. So MJ, before we let you go, I'm going to throw it to you. What are your predictions, expectations, hopes for the rest of the 2021 season with the Dodgers?
I think they run it back again. And we're just going to leave it at that in hopes.
Well, there's MJ with her hot bowl take of running it back in 2021. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join my show. It was great having you. I was going to say I'll talk to you soon, but I'll be seeing you in about 2 minutes once I wrap this up, and we need to figure out what to watch tonight with the no Dodgers game on, because that really throws a wrench in our viewing schedule in regards to the evenings. All right, so that was a lot of fun recording with my girlfriend. I loved hearing what she had to say about all the different topics that we brought up. So, MJ, shout out to you. Thanks for, I guess, one, tolerating me in general, but two, hopping on my podcast. That was a lot of fun. All right, we're going to wrap things up as we do with every show. I'm going to be answering your guys' questions. So, if you guys want to ask me a question on a future episode, follow me on Twitter at BlakeHarrisTBLA. Turn on those notifications because whenever I record a podcast, usually about 30 minutes to an hour before I record, I tweet out saying, hey, I'm going to be recording. Hit me up with any questions you guys got, and I go through, I answer as many questions as I can. So again, if you want to ask a question in a future episode, that's how you can do it. So we got time for a few questions right now. I'll try to get to as many as I possibly can. So let's get this underway. Max Muncy Stan. What would a Trea Turner extension look like? Well, a Trea Turner extension would certainly look a lot better than whatever the Nationals gave him. I don't have this in front of me, but I think I saw some report the other day that the Nationals were like supposedly offering Trea Turner something like in the ballpark of like $100 million extension a year or two ago. In a year and a half, Trea Turner very well could be warranted a $300 million contract extension. I mean, this guy, as I've said before, hits for contact, hits for power, has amazing speed, is a difference maker, on the bases, plays really good defense. So I don't think it's out of the realm for him to get $300 million. I definitely think he'll be in the ballpark of $200 to $250 million. So if the Dodgers want to do that, in a year and a half or maybe sometime this offseason, give him an extension, I myself personally would rather extend Trea Turner over Corey Seager just for the fact that, one, he's more durable. I mean, Corey Seager, I know he's had some fluke injuries, but just his health is a little concerning for me, especially the fact that I just don't see him as a shortstop long term. And I do think Trea Turner will cost maybe a little less. So we'll have to wait and see, but a Trea Turner extension, it'll be definitely interesting to see moving forward. Carlos Correa's burner. That's an interesting name right there. What is the Dodgers' best path to getting the division? Well, our best path is the Giants losing on the same day the Dodgers can win. I mean, the Dodgers haven't won a game on the same day the Giants have lost a game, aside from them playing each other, since July 24th. So if the Giants want to eventually lose some games, that would be fantastic. The Dodgers are 4 games back currently with 50 games to go. Plenty of time. Even if there were only 10 games left, the Dodgers would still have a chance, so I'm not too concerned yet. I know the Dodgers play the Giants 3 more times. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I know that the Giants and Padres, I think, play 10 times in the month of September, so hopefully they beat each other up. Hopefully they split that series, and the Dodgers can make some ground there. So the Dodgers, obviously, they're going to need the Giants to lose, but the Dodgers are also going to have to win games. I mean, they don't have like a 3-game winning streak since, I want to say, over a month ago. So the Dodgers, they just, the Giants are winning a lot. I think they have the best record in all of baseball still, while the Dodgers have like the third best record in all of baseball. But the Dodgers are also killing themselves. The Dodgers are also biting themselves. So as long as the Dodgers can keep winning, I know as easy as that is to say, if the Dodgers can just, put some win streaks together, go 5-0, over a 10-game stretch, go 9-1, have stretches like that, and the Dodgers should be in first place in no time. Again, unless the Giants just go like 40-10 the rest of the way. So we'll have to wait and see. The biggest, this comes from Phil Bick God for MVP. The biggest question is who will take on the role of hugging Tio Albert when he homers? Will it be Muncy? Yeah, that's a good question. Albert Pujols is always the guy giving hugs when someone else hits a home run, but what happens when Albert Pujols hits a home run? Who's supposed to hug him? I believe yesterday when Pujols hit that absolute moonshot against his former team, the Angels, which was fantastic, by the way, I want to say Muncy was the first one to welcome him back with a hug. So if we're going to designate anyone, I say it's got to be Muncy. Well, Muncy is going to be my guess. M/G. Do you see the Dodgers extending Trea Turner and or Max Scherzer? If so, what happens to Seager and Gonsolin moving forward? I just talked about that in regards to Trea Turner and a possible extension. I'm not entirely sure. The Dodgers are in a good position because they have either Corey Seager or Trea Turner to choose from. I think between those two, they'll extend at least one, potentially both. I think the Dodgers made the Max Scherzer, well, just one, they made the Nationals trade just to get better and give them a better chance of winning the World Series this year. But I do think they also made the trade with the idea of extending Max Scherzer. I think I talked about this on my podcast last week, but the only arms that are guaranteed to be in the Dodgers starting rotation next season are Walker Buehler and Julio Urias. Clayton Kershaw is a free agent. I still think he'll be back with the Dodgers, but that's not a guarantee. Dustin May is going to be out likely until the All-Star break. David Price, do you want him as a starter or do you want him to be a bullpen piece still? Tony Gonsolin, I just don't know what to expect with him moving forward. So the Dodgers are going to need some starting pitchers next season, and I think Max Scherzer is going to be that guy. With Scherzer being, I believe, 37 years old right now, he's not going to be getting a 5, 6, 7-year deal, something like that. So I am perfectly fine. I am totally on board with the Dodgers giving him a 2-year deal, maybe a 3-year deal, something like that. But I do think it's in the Dodgers' cards. The only problem is Max Scherzer is a Scott Boras client, so he's going to expect a large payday, which, although Max Scherzer is 37, I don't know if I'd want to give him something like 30, 35 million a year. But granted, he doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. So if they're able to win a World Series with Max Scherzer, you can lock him down for 1 or 2 more years. Then again, it's not my money, so who cares what the price is? But I do think the Dodgers ultimately are going to try to bring Max Scherzer back at some time this offseason. Pujols, 2021 MVP. How would you describe Cody Bellinger's performance recently? Do you think a trip to the minors would help him regain confidence? So I know a lot of people have been all over Bellinger, pretty much talking about how he's been struggling all season. Should he go to the minors to try to rehab, to try to, get a little better if that's the case? I personally don't think the minors is going to make much difference. I think he's still trying to recover from this offseason shoulder injury. I mean, he's dealt with a hamstring injury, a foot injury, or leg injury this year, so he's just been banged up pretty badly. This past week, Cody Bellinger has looked pretty good. I mean, he's having a lot better at-bats at the plate. He has a home run in 2 consecutive games. I believe his home run yesterday was on a fastball, which is very encouraging because Cody Bellinger against fastballs has looked awful this season. So I just quickly had to get up his numbers on Baseball Reference. So over his last 6 games, Cody Bellinger's actually hitting .318, has an OPS of .984. So it looks like he's slowly starting to kind of figure things out. I mean, if you want to go back even more, if you want to go back to July 23rd, he's hitting .250 with an OPS of above 800. So the last couple of weeks, Cody Bellinger has quietly been getting better at the plate. The power's slowly starting to come. So I'm on board with Cody Bellinger getting more consistent playing time. It's going to be tough seeing what happens when everyone's healthy. Something I didn't even mention when I was talking about injuries at the beginning of the episode was Justin Turner, who left yesterday's game. Not exactly certain how long he's going to be out for. I think Dave Roberts said it's a day-to-day thing, so he might be out a couple of days. But once everyone's healthy, I mean, there's going to be an odd man out between either A.J. Pollock, Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger, Justin Turner, one of those guys. And, A.J. Pollock's been the best hitter for the Dodgers this season. I mean, he's hitting like 310 right now. You can't bench him. Chris Taylor's been the MVP for the Dodgers this season. You can't bench him. And if Cody Bellinger all of a sudden is hitting for power, like I mentioned, has an OPS of nearly 1,000 over his last week, it's going to be tough to see. So it's a good problem to have. What are the Dodgers going to do? What's Dave Roberts going to do? We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, a lot of questions you guys had to do with things I've already mentioned, talked about either in this Q&A or earlier in the episode. So if I didn't get to your question, that's probably why I kind of already answered it. So again, I appreciate everyone for your questions. Again, if you have a question for me for a future episode, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Blake Harris TBLA. The latest Dodgers news there, it's an absolute must follow if you're a Dodgers fan. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, again, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I don't have a date as to when I record these on a consistent basis. I'm still trying to go for 1 or 2 a week, so again, stay tuned on my Twitter for when my next episode drops. Again, thank you so much to MJ for joining me. Thank you to you guys for tuning in. Again, if you want to talk Dodgers with me, you guys can either hit my DMs on Twitter, you can be in my mentions, ask me anything Dodgers related. I'll try to get to as many questions as I can over there because I love interacting with you guys on Twitter as well. But yeah, guys, as I said, thank you guys so much for listening. I really do appreciate you guys tuning into my podcast on a week-to-week basis. Dodgers fans are the best, but you guys already know that. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Blake Harris, and I'll talk to you guys in my next podcast.